Imagine two identical twins so that you can't even distinguish to the ordinary person, you can't see the difference of them. One converts and one doesn't. One is Jewish and one is Gentile. Think of the volume of halachot, the volume of laws that applies to the one that doesn't apply to the other. If you asked somebody to describe them, they would have exactly the same description. Height, their size, their color of their eyes, their color of their hair, and yet one is a Jewish person and one is a non-Jewish person with completely different laws and definitions about them. How does the Torah look at these differences? When two things look the same but have different definitions, different conceptual definitions, do we relate to them as the same or do we relate to them as different? Definitions and descriptions, bimino azaline Avodah Zarah Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. We have a statement which is further on, 6 daf ahead, where the Mishnah says Zeh haklal. This is the rule. This is a principle in Hilchos Ta'arovis. Hilchos Ta'arovis is a complex area of halacha that is a critical part of a smicha program. When one learns for smicha to become a Rav, Hilchos Ta'arovis is the piece that one has to spend probably the most time on and the most important to master. Not just because there are a lot of halachot involved with that. Hilchos Ta'arovis is when Isur and Heter get mixed up together. When something which is forbidden and something which is permitted, kosher and treif, truma and not truma, all sorts of cases, yain nesech and not yain nesech, different cases of things that are forbidden and that are permitted, get mixed up together. How do we treat the mixture? And the reason that that's important is not just the complexity of the laws, but firstly, the very idea of how do you deal with mixtures is what life is about, because very seldom is life black and white. So the dinim of ta'arovet, as one learns how to deal with ta'arovet, with mixtures, that clarifies how to deal with life in so many ways. I don't think that there are many smicha programs that point that out, that that's what you're actually dealing with. You're dealing with a world view of black and white versus gray and how to manage that area. And the other reason that Ta'arovis is important is the method of paskening. The method of reaching halachic conclusion is the finest in Hilchos Ta'arovis, more than any area of Shulchan Aruch. The area of Ta'arovis is where you get to the finest reasoning of differentiating between that which is forbidden and that which is allowed, which is the essence of what psak, what a Rav gets smicha for, is to be able to distinguish between that which is asur and that which is mutar. That's what a shaila is. May I do this? May I not do this? Is this kosher? Is this treif? So the Rav's whole work in the area of psak is being able to distinguish between that which is forbidden and that which is asur, and the roots of that function is all in Hilchot Ta'arovet in Yoreh De'ah. And one of the principles in Hilchot Ta'arovet is the klal on Daf Ayin Gimel that we have further on, that min b'mino b'mashu v'shelo b'minin b'noisen tam. If two things get mixed up together, but the two things are not similar, so yain nesech we're not allowed to drink. Yain nesech gets mixed up with beer. Are you allowed to drink the mixture? Has the yain nesech, has this non-kosher wine contaminated the beer or not? So that's b'shishim. We use the principle of tam. It depends whether there's any vestige of taste of the wine in this mixture. So you've got a barrel of beer and a few spoonfuls of yain nesech fell into the barrels of beer. It doesn't affect it. You can't taste the wine. And since there's no effect of that which is forbidden on the experience of eating, of consuming this new mixture, since there's no experience of the thing which is asur, the total thing is considered mutar. And when you don't know whether there's taste or not, if it was just a little teaspoonful that fell into a barrel, you know that there's no taste. But if you're not quite sure whether there's taste or there isn't taste, we use the principle of shishim. The Chachamim tell us that generally, if there's more than 60 times the amount of heter, that which is permitted, against that which is asur, that which is forbidden, then bitul applies. That's called botel b'shishim, as you've heard many times. However, if it's min b'mino, if this yain nesech falls into a barrel of wine, it's just treif wine falls into kosher wine, yain nesech falls into kosher wine, now we have a problem. The taste is irrelevant, because how do you can't taste the difference. They both taste the same. So now it's b'mashu. Now it doesn't matter how small. One little teaspoonful of yain nesech falls into a barrel of yain kosher, of kosher wine. That's b'mashu. Even the tiniest little bit. We don't use 60. We don't use taste. There's no bittul. It makes the whole thing asur. And the whole questions which we'll maybe have opportunities to go into. The sugya comes in here, and again, we'll have it in Zvachim. We'll have opportunities to speak about these concepts. Are they d'oraisa? Are they d'rabbanan? These laws of the rabbis or laws of the Torah, and so on. Is this specifically with yain nesech, or is this generic to all cases? All of these, Rashi touches on some of it over here. These are things we'll work on. But what I want to work on is a barrier we reach on this page, on the stuff. That means I can understand the idea that if a little bit of wine spills into a barrel of beer, the question is, can you experience the wine? If you can't experience the wine, it's irrelevant. The fact that chemically there's something asur, we don't treat it like poison. We don't say, the fact is there's poison, there's cyanide in this barrel, who would eat the barrel? Isser is not poison. It doesn't work the same way. It's about the human experience. If you can't experience the wine, then the barrel is considered kosher. However, if it's wine into wine, yain nesek into yain kosher, now you've got a problem because you can experience it. It's all one taste. Where you have conflict, where you've got two different views, you can resolve it. Where the different views start merging and you can't tell the difference between them, it gets very dangerous. You've got Islam and Judaism, you've got Christianity and Judaism, no problem. Each has a philosophy, each has a system of laws, each is identifiable, no difficulty. It's easy to manage that interaction. It's easy to engage because you know the rules of engagement. When you get onto Reform and Orthodox, and you get onto modern Orthodox, somewhere in between Reform and Orthodox, and you get conservative, now this is bimino. Now this gets very complicated. So that you need difference in order to reach resolution. There's more peace when there's difference than there is when you try and create genericism, when you try and create sameness. When you try and create sameness, you can't resolve anything. When you define difference, you can create peace, you can bring things together, you can relate, you can interact. And we see this right through Hilchos Tarovis, through the way we deal with mixtures. Because a lot of, we haven't got time to go into this now, but so much of what's happening in the political world over the last several hundred years, but very much now, is about this. Genericism versus specificism. Boundaries, nationalities, ethnicities, diversity. A lot of what's going on at the moment is around, do you want everybody to be the same and get on happily ever after? Or do you understand the differences between people and manage those differences? That's Hilchos Tarovis. Rabbi Grant, you're the most recent person who's done Hilchos Tarovis in this room. Is that how the Hilchos Tarovis is taught in the thing? That this is about life. This is not about chemicals. This is about worldview. This is how you understand the newspaper. And that's not how it's taught today. That I get. Here's the problem. The problem is Rava. Rava throws a spanner in the works. Now you remember Abaye and Rava, very important. They're all over Shas and they argue a lot of things because they have different worldviews. We generally paskin like Rava. A few cases we paskin like Abaye. What's the case here? Challah de chamra v'challah de shikra. Vinegar made from wine, vinegar made from beer. Chamira de chiti v'chamira de seiri. Yeast made from wheat and wheat made from barley. One is kosher, one isn't. Or one is truma and one is, as Rashi says. Abaye omar benoisen tam. Abaye says these are two different things. This is min b'she'eino mina. And therefore we go after whether there's a taste or not. One is made from wine, one is made from beer. One is made from wheat, one is made from barley. It's two different things. V'hai time eluchud, v'hai time eluchud. They've got two different tastes. Min b'she'eino mina, min b'she'eino mina b'noisen tam. This is a case of min b'she'eino mina. This is a case of two different things that got mixed together, and we follow the experience, and the experience is dependent on taste. Is the dilution so great that you can't taste the one that's been added, or is there still a vestige of taste? That's what we look at. V'Rava amar b'mashu. Rava says no. This is b'mashu, b'asa shma azdlin. And the fact is, it's vinegar and vinegar. The fact is, it's yeast and yeast. Chemically, it's wheat and barley. Chemically, it's grapes and barley, whatever hops, whatever the beer is made from. So chemically, they're different. But in terms of definition, they're the same. V'hai chalo mikri. This is called vinegar, and that's called vinegar. V'hai chamira mikri. This is called yeast, and this is called yeast. So that's min b'mina. V'havele min b'mina. V'chol min b'mina b'mashu. What's the essential issue between them? Says the Gemara further on. I haven't quoted it here in the piece. The difference is v'rov amar b'mashu bata shema azlina. What we go after, so it is over here. B'mashu bata shema azlina. Because according to Rava, we go by the definition, not by the description. The description is, this is made from wheat, and this is made from, you look at the label. And if you read the label, you'll see they're different. If you look at the contents, you'll see one, the contents is wheat, and one, the contents is grapes. But if you look at the name, where in the aisle in the supermarket are they? They're both in the same aisle. They're with vinegar. Grape vinegar and beer vinegar, same place. Yeast made from one property, yeast made from another component in the same place in the supermarket. They're the same concept. Rava is the problem. Because what's this got to do with bitul? What is this got to do with the laws of ta'aruvus? You're dealing now with intellectual concepts? I understand if you're dealing with a chemistry, you're dealing with the experience of taste. But to decide whether or not it's min b'mino or min b'she'eino mino, is this a mixture of similar things or a mixture of different things? To define that by their technical names, not by their actual chemical properties, what's the logic of that? How does that even work? And the Shulchan Aruch paskins like Rava. We've got to take Rava very seriously. There are more paskins. Ule'inyan min b'mino azlinan basa shema. We go after the name. Im hu shove havi min b'mino aval lo azlinan bata taima. Im hu shove oloi. We don't go by the taste. This is not about taste. We paskin like Rava, says the Ramo. We go after the definition. We don't go after the description. Is how Rava passes. The Shach argues with him, and the questions. It doesn't really matter how we land up lahalocha. Rava is Rava. We've got to understand him, and Rava is generally the halacha. There are more paskins like Rava. We've got to take Rava very, very, very seriously. What does Rava mean? How does Rava explain this? What is the understanding of this? So if we go back, you'll remember we've talked about it before. We've talked about Rav Kook on this and others that speak about the machlokas and Abaye and Rava, the different times that Abaye and Rava disagree with one another, which we track back to the Gemara in Brochus Daf Mem Ches, where Rabbo, their Rebbe, when Abaye and Rava were small, they both learnt by Rabbo. And Rabbo gave them something to eat and asked them to make a brocha and said to them, who are we blessing in this brocha? And they said, God, Hashem. And he said, and where's Hashem? Rabbi asks these two little kids, and Rava points there, he points upwards, and Abaye runs out of the Beis HaMedrash and points to the sky. And Rav Kook and others explain a different worldview. And Rav Kook has his way of explaining, which we've learnt about before, but based on this Gemara, let's take it slightly differently. What the machlokes Abaye and Rava is, as the little children, which remain their worldview throughout their lives. It's so interesting. The children are born not only with physical qualities in their DNA, they're born with midos. There are certain characteristics that little children are born with. The moment they're born, they have certain midos. They're strong in certain midos, weaker in other midos. They're even born with worldviews, a way of looking at the world. They're born with lenses through which to look at the world. It's so amazing. Abaye and Rava, two different worldviews that they follow throughout their lives. And our Shas and Poskim, all of our Halacha, everything is based on these two worldviews. Abaye's worldview is, look at the big world outside and you can get back to the Torah. Start with with nature, with the universe, study it. Su marom einecha. Look with your eyes up to the skies and see mi bara eile, who created all this. You'll get to Hashem. And once you've got to Hashem, you'll get to the Torah. Start from the outside in, the way Avraham Avinu did it. Avraham Avinu didn't have a Torah, but he worked the Torah out. He worked the Torah out from studying the universe. And we learned the Ben Ish Chai only a few days ago about the Yenuko, that you can have a little child can intuit things. Leah and Rachel, these were people who grew up in the houses of idolaters, but they were able to learn the Torah. They learned from studying the universe, outside in. Rava says, no, you're in the Beis HaMedrash. study definitions in the Beis HaMedrash, and through the lens of the Torah, look at the world. Study the world through the lens of the Torah. Don't study the Torah through the lens of the world. And that's their machlekes. And both are true. We know that Avraham Avinu could get to the Torah by studying the universe. We know also that we don't have that capacity. We have to study the Torah and look at the universe through the Torah's eyes. And we have to hold both of these in our minds. So let's have a look at it over here. It says Abaye, if you want to know whether this is min b'mino or it's not min b'mino, look at the chemistry, look at the science. Just see what they are. Look at the contents. Read the label. And it says X% of this and Y% of that. See what it's made from. And then you can make your decision. Is this min b'mino or not min b'mino? Rava says no. You look at halachic definition. And halacha defines it by the way it's used. This is vinegar. And this vinegar and that vinegar are used for the same purpose. That they're chemically different, that doesn't make a difference. That's not what it is. Halachically, these are two different things. This kind of soor and that kind of soor, it's the same. So halachically, it's the same thing. This kind of soor, this kind of yeast, and that kind of yeast comes chometz b'Pesach. You're not going to talk about the differences between the yeasts. They're both yeasts. They're both natural yeasts. They're both chometz. Halacha deals with them as one because they are halachically defined as one, and therefore it's a min b'mino. You don't look at the chemistry. So if you're looking at these two twins, Rava would say halachically, these are completely different human beings. They might look the same to you, but they're completely different human beings. And Abaye might say, but at the end of the day, they're both human beings. That doesn't mean that they would have the same halachot according to Abaye, of course, but in terms of looking and understanding, look and see what it is, and that links back to the ishbitza that we had on Daf Nun, which I quote again at the back of the page. We talks about inyan havdalahu b'davar she'eino nikar v'nir'eh be'ein enoshi. The importance when we say Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, we bless God every morning. Asher natan lasechvi bina lavchin ben yom uvein laila, that gave the human being the capacity to discern between day and night, even before the light is visible. We know already what time the Alot HaShachar is, and we can sense it. If we're sensitive, we can sense it. We can wake up at that time, just as the cock can sense it. There is the capacity to sense difference even when it's not visible. And we need that capacity because that teaches us how to differentiate between that which is kodesh, that which is holy, and that which is chol. And then he goes on to talk about seeing things at their essence and not seeing things on their surface. Abaye says you look at things on their surface and then you work out their essence from that. Rava says you get straight to the essence. We've got the Torah. Before we had the Torah, you had to look at the world from the outside and work in. But now that we've been given the Torah, that's the difference of before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah, before Sinai and after Sinai. Before Sinai, you had to get to Torah through science. After Sinai, you understand science through Torah. It's a completely different way of looking. They both intermingle. They're so coherent. They're so congruent with one another that you can get from one to the other. But in reasoning, the way you reasoned before Sinai is from the general to the specific. The way you reason after Sinai is from the specific to the general. And therefore, in our case here, where we're talking about differentiating between these two types of vinegar or these two types of yeast, Abaye says, at the end of the day, look at the science. You'll see they're different. Rava says at the end of the day, they're halachically the same. You've got to look at that through the halachic lens and say, beer vinegar and wine vinegar are both vinegar. Halachically, the essence of these things is not what they're made of. A scientist takes out his microscope and says, essentially, these things are different. The halachist takes out his halachic microscope and says, essentially, these things are the same. As important as it is in halacha to differentiate between two things that look the same, it's equally important to be able to see that two things that look different are in fact the same. That's what halacha is, that's what Jewish living is to be able to look at a ta'arovis, to be able to look at a mixture and see and understand, is this a mixture where we have to recognize and respond to the separate components of the mixture? Or is this a situation where we've got to consider this as one integrated whole and we need to relate to it that way? And developing that sensitivity is part of the process of growing and learning in halacha.